Chapter Master of the Ultramarines, the poster boy of the chapter of poster boys. This week we're going to be talking about Marneus Calgar and how he's actually pretty epic. Hey everybody, and welcome back to another video on Sultan Plays. This week I'm going to be hobbying with Marneus Calgar's newer Primaris model and his Victrix guard. I'm converting him up so he'll fit in with my Voidwalker's force, as I run them as Ultramarines, but they're not Ultramarines. So when I play him, he won't be Marneus Calgar, but it's his model. So I thought this would be a great opportunity to talk about some lore and some of the cool stuff that Marneus has done. I did another episode on Pedro Cantor previously, and there's definitely going to be more because I love the lore surrounding these Space Marine characters within the 41st millennium. And I felt I owed Calgar a video after completely forgetting he too also has a paint named after him. Sorry. So in no particular order, let's start listing off the epic deeds of the Chapter Master of the Ultramarines. Number 1, completely unfazed by Tyranids. As we know, the first Tyranid War took place mostly around Ultramar, so that meant that the Ultramarines were one of the first chapters to engage High Fleet Behemoth. And what does Marneus do when encountering an extra-galactic threat never seen on this scale? Well, meets it with fire and blood. Deciding not to take the Tyranids on in piecemeal actions, he led them all the way back to Macragge, garrisoned the two polar fortresses, while he himself led a rearguard action, taking on the Tyranids to buy time for the beleaguered planet. An expert at gunline tactics, he routinely led Tyranids into well-placed ambushes where the Space Marines who were dug in with enfilading fire could take on the Xenos horrors. This culminated in a one-on-one fight with the Swarm Lord, which, because it's a Swarm Lord, laid him low, but the fact he was completely ready to give his life only adds to how epic he is. A character's not that epic if he's not fallible, and Marneus is pretty fallible. There is nothing more noble than facing long odds and succeeding. In this case, he inspired such loyalty that his honor guards stepped in and took the blows that were meant for him. Despite his injuries, he led a fleet sortie into orbit, where the Tyranids' main strength was gathered. The self-sacrifice of a crew of the Dominus Astra detonating their warp drives forced the High Fleet into a rift, leaving them adrift in the warp. There are many heroes among the Imperials, with Calgar being just one. But his resolute command in the face of a threat hitherto undreamt of is commendable. That and taking a sucker punch from a Swarm Lord and getting back up, pretty badass. Number 2 on the list of why Marneus Calgar is epic is he was the first to cross the Rubicon Primaris. During the Indomitus Crusade, Primarch Guilliman had returned, and with him brought the Primaris Space Marines, soldiers of the Imperium with additional genetic enhancements, further giving them an edge over the enemies of the Emperor. Calgar felt it was his duty to make himself a better weapon of war and demanded to undergo the treatment. The creator of the Primaris Space Marines, Belisarius Cawl, would conduct the procedure himself. However, he was warned there was a above 61% chance of failure and death, as the procedure was incredibly new and had not been tested on original Space Marines. But to paraphrase Marneus Calgar, alright, bet, let's do it. During the procedure, he was dead for 20 solar minutes, the longest time of anyone crossing the Rubicon Primaris. But you can't keep a good soldier down, and the Belisarian Furnace eventually activated and restored Calgar to life. With the concept proved that you can, in fact, upgrade, for lack of a better term, firstborn Space Marines into the new Primaris shell, and the lessons learned from this risky first procedure, Marines across the galaxy began crossing the Rubicon. Now a pioneer on two fronts, being the first to meet and defeat the Tyranids, and also the first to cross the Rubicon. Moving on to reason number 3 why Calgar is epic, he took a demotion. In my old line of work, we used to say the best controllers are the ones who had to do the course twice. And in this case, Calgar is somewhat similar. Previously the Master of Macragge, or the Master of Ultramar, he has been demoted to, albeit a still pretty cool title, Lord Defender of Greater Ultramar. as only Rubicon Guilliman, now the returned Primarch and master of the previously known 13th Legion, is recognised as the true ruler of Ultramar. Whilst not a massive demotion, and somewhat expected given that Rubicon Guilliman is back, it does cast Calgar somewhat adrift as he feels somewhat superfluous to requirements, as Guilliman historically is also the leader of the Ultramarines, a position that Calgar had held for several hundred years up to the rebirth of the Primarch. However, it quickly became apparent that Marneus was still the true commander of the Ultramarines chapter. His father and Primarch Rubicon Guilliman was simply too busy trying to piece back together the Imperium. In all things, Rubicon began to lean on Calgar for advice and guidance in this new future that he had been completely unaware of. In this, despite the demotion, also came somewhat of a promotion. If not in title or in word, but in spirit. Calgar became the right-hand man of the most powerful being in the Imperial space. In fact, this actually ties in nicely to epic point number 4. He completely ignored his first captain's rejection of the idea that Guilliman could be awoken, and is in fact, as a result of this decision, one of the main reasons that Guilliman is even alive. That's a smaller point, but worth mentioning. Reason number 5 is probably my favourite one, and it might be a little bit to do with nostalgia, having read this in a codex years ago, but also because it is just incredible. At the battle for Aura's Sepulchre, the Ultramarines were called to aid a somewhat unwise planetary governor who executed an Eldar emissary. Skipping through the unwise decisions and some Eldar trickery, we come to the point where, in a defensive mission, an avatar of Kayla Mencha Kane, the Eldar god of war, is attacking the besieged Ultramarines. The avatar was impervious to heavy weapons fire, and the Ultramarines' battle line began to buckle, so Calgar, leading from the front, issued a challenge himself. Bellowing fury and spitting molten fire, the fiery god advanced on the Ultramarines' chapter master, its first blow missing by just a hair's breadth. The second tore plates from Calgar's armour, while a third bit deep into his shoulder, driving him to his knees. A fourth blow came screaming in, only to slam into the armoured palm of Calgar's left hand. Despite the intense heat and pain, Calgar squeezed the blade and held on, rising up, bringing his other gauntlet around in a huge arc that punched clean through the ichor of the avatar's torso. With a thunderclap and a roar of rage, the war god fell, and the Eldar lost heart and retreated. Meanwhile, Calgar, bloodied, bruised, but unbroken and unbowed, stood ready to take the next wave of assaults. In a similar vein, reason number 6 is when Calgar had a one-on-one duel with Abaddon that was set to not go amazingly well for the chapter master versus the demigod that is the former first captain of the Lunar Wolves. He broke Abaddon's jaw. Admittedly, that's a punch with artificer-crafted power fists, but that's Abaddon, and he broke his jaw. Probably made him quite mad. Likewise, number 7 is ripping the head from a Lord of Skulls despite having been impaled by a sword. There's not much more to add to this, but that's pretty frickin' epic. Having our final reason be Lord of Skull losing Skull to Marneus Calgar is a perfect reason to end on 7 reasons why Calgar is epic. There are so many other reasons that he's epic, and there's also a lot of reasons that can maybe detract from why he's epic, but we're not here to cover those today. I thought I'd use this last part of the video just to briefly talk you through what I've been doing in the painting process. I am painting up Calgar as a member of the Voidwalkers, which means whilst he's going to be using Marneus Calgar's rules, this character won't actually be Calgar. It will be a captain or chapter master of some other kind. Basically, if I'm going to run Ultramarines, I might as well treat myself to their characters every now and again. Guilliman will come along at some point. I won't go too into depth what I've been doing, but essentially this is a quartered blue and purple scheme with red accents on the cloak. Sometimes I do a purple cloak, but with the quartered scheme it's a little bit too much. He's quite easy to kit bash with and remove most of the Ultramarine symbols, or at least reduce the amount quite substantially. The only one I found difficult was at the bottom of his leather straps at the front, but I don't really mind that. Maybe they were a gift, or maybe he just likes the design. Likewise, you won't see it in this video, but the Victrix guard was somewhat simple to do as well, the hardest part being the shield. I just got some sanding sticks, sandpaper will also work fine, and sanded them down over time to make them nice flat shields that I could paint a bunch of freehand heraldry on. Having seen his recent 10th edition index rules, he's an absolute beast in combat, one of the only Space Marine characters with 3 damage weapons, and also really nice bolter stats to boot. Add into the fact he's got 6 wounds, and his buddies that come with him that have to die first have 3 each, and everyone has a 2-up save with a feel no pain. I have a feeling he's going to be a right pain to remove from the battlefield, which I'm a fan of. I really do fancy reinforcing with some kind of Ultramarines Honor Guard, once again heavily converted, but we'll cross that bridge when we come to it. Overall, I really wanted to paint Calgar for several reasons. One, he's a really cool model, and I got him in the Imperium magazine subscription, so I had him lying about. 2, he has some really cool bodyguards, which are like Ultramarine specific blade guard. Love them. And 3, because he's one of the first characters we usually learn about in the 41st millennium. At least he was prior to the rebirth of Guilliman, who, you'll probably learn about first these days. So he's faded into the background somewhat, a small amount, but he's still an absolutely amazing character, even if he does suffer a little bit from plot armor every now and again. That does it for this video. I've been Sam. See you next time.